Hello and welcome to today's NSVGCA webinar. Before we begin, I'd like to note that this webinar is being recorded and all presentation materials will be posted on our website. If you have any questions during the webinar, please use the Q&A feature or email us at events@nsvgca.org. I'd now like to introduce you to today's speaker, Allison DeSantis with LegalZoom. Thank you for joining us, Allison.
Thank you. It's great to be here today. And so, as you said, my name is Allison DeSantis. I am a business formation and compliance attorney with LegalZoom, and I previously worked for the Ohio Secretary of State's office for 16 years. So I have a lot of experience in helping businesses start and grow. So today I'm looking forward to talking to you guys about compliance issues, why compliance matters, and really reframing this from just kind of something where you have to check the box to thinking about how it unlocks growth for your business. And so we'll go through the key filings that might be required for your business, managing your multi-state operations, handling any structure changes to your business, and then reducing fraud and compliance risks. I'm going to end with some resources and tips and some time for Q&A. So first, to talk about why compliance matters. So people hear of compliance and they think of that it's a burden, it's a box they have to check, it is, it's something that could result in penalties or late fees. And really, for an established business, compliance is a business asset. And so if it's something that you're paying attention to, you can use it to your advantage. And so first, talking about why compliance matters. This really signals to outside parties, to potential investors, to customers, to banks, that you're a legitimate business, that you're stable, and that you're professional. So it's not just meeting legal requirements, but it's giving that message to others about how you're running your business. So banks and investors and even regulators often look at your compliance status, and that's how they're assessing your risk and your credibility. And so they're looking at how you run your business and are you maintaining that good standing with the state? It tells them a lot more than just you have an active status with the business. Makes them much more comfortable to do business with you. So this is more than just checking the box on your legal requirements, but it is an asset that allows you to expand your business, allows you to secure funding with banks or potential investors, and it could attract those potential investors and even customers. So what's at risk if you're not compliant? Well, the biggest thing is the loss of good standing. And when I talk about loss of good standing, I'm talking about with the state. And in most cases, it's the Secretary of State. So this is where you have registered and where you're maintaining your business. If you are not doing these certain legal requirements, you are risking losing that good standing with the state, which has a lot of negative impacts. The way that you could potentially lose that good standing is failure to file periodic reports. In most states, that's called an annual report. Failure to maintain a registered agent, or not filing your taxes. And not filing your taxes can result in that loss of good standing and also a lot of financial penalties. The biggest thing that I have seen over the years when I've been working with small businesses is most of the time they don't even know that they've lost that good standing until it's really interfering with their ability to have either a transaction go through, obtaining a loan from a bank, or filing in a new state. And that's when they realize that they're no longer in good standing with their own state, and they just didn't even know that that was happening. So we want to avoid that. And some of the tips that we'll talk about today will ensure that you don't lose that good standing and that you're always keeping up to date with your status with the state. If you have lost that good standing, if you are no longer compliant, this really does impact your ability to expand your business. So it can impact your ability to transact business in your own state and to file in new states. It also disrupts your banking relationships. So you might have opened a business bank account already. When you do that, the bank is looking at your state records to make sure you're registered and you're active and in good standing. But if you ever have to make a change to your account, they're going to recheck that as well. And so if you're opening new accounts or applying for a loan and you're not in good standing with the state, that's going to impact your banking relationship. Another thing that we'll talk about in more detail later in this presentation is the increased fraud and penalty exposure. So one, if you're not filing your reports on time, especially those tax reports or annual reports, there could be late fees or penalties that come with it. But what we're seeing with fraud is entities that are inactive or not compliant are more susceptible to fraud. And that's because these criminals assume that someone's just not paying attention to the business. And so they make for a better target. So staying in good standing is really unlocking these growth opportunities through these key pillars. And so we wanted to talk about these today. Staying in good standing is a strategic move. This is going to allow you to expand and grow your business. So first, as I mentioned before, if you're going to expand to a new state, you have to be in good standing in your original state of formation. You need to be in good standing to access capital. So lenders and investors are going to be considering the risk and they're going to be looking at your history. It's not just your status as it appears right now, but they're going to look at your compliance history from the time that you started your business. So that's why it's really important to always remain in good standing. It can also impact your access to legal rights. So by remaining compliant and in good standing, you have the ability to prosecute and defend legal actions. If you're not in good standing with your state, the courts won't necessarily give you access to those cases. Another big impact on your potential legal rights is if you aren't maintaining a registered agent, you might not be getting your legal mail. And if you're not getting your legal mail, you could be missing what's called service of process. So if someone sues you and they serve your registered agent, you have a certain time period, sometimes 21 or 30 days to respond to that case. If you're missing that because you don't have a valid registered agent or you don't have a reliable registered agent, you might miss that window and fail to respond, which can result in a default judgment against you. And then finally, ensuring your business continuity and longevity. This is really more than just filing reports and remaining in good standing, but maintaining all those corporate formalities that are required that ensure that you are a stable business long term. You're going to avoid administrative dissolutions by the state by continuing all of these formalities. Oops, apologies, I went too far there. Okay, so these are the essentials, and I kind of touched on some of these, but to go into more detail on what is required by these are the main things that you need to do to remain compliant with the state. Now, there are other things that, with more time, we could talk about things beyond this, like business licenses and insurance requirements, but the main things that you need to do with your state, typically the Secretary of State's office, is your periodic filings. Now, not every state has a periodic filing, but most have an annual report or a biennial report requirement. So it's important if you don't know that about your entity type, make sure you check with your state to see what your responsibility is. These periodic filings are intended to give the state updated information about your business. Number one, it shows that you're still active, you're doing business. But two, it allows you to update your contact information. So you have a valid address or email or phone number on file with the state. And this ensures that you're getting notices from them if anything were to change or if they need to reach you. A lot of times, I would say this is probably the number one reason that entities are administratively dissolved by the state. So if you fail to file this required report, you can be dissolved by the state, which means you're no longer active or able to do business. And it varies again by state to how soon after you miss that deadline that the state could administratively dissolve you. So important to know that information about your specific business. Registered agent requirements, most states require this as well. This is an individual or a business entity that you've designated on your filings with the Secretary of State to maintain to receive your legal mail. And so this address and this contact information is really important. This person needs to be reliable. They need to be at that physical mailing address during regular business hours. And so they need to be able to accept legal mail and get it to you promptly. If that name or address changes, you need to update the state immediately. Tax filings, really important with the state and the IRS to submit those tax returns and make your tax payments timely to avoid penalties. And then for maintaining formalities, this can varies based on your entity type in particular. Corporations have a lot more formality requirements than LLCs. But it might mean maintaining internal documentations, bylaws, operating agreements. For corporations, you'll have annual meetings that you need to have, and you need to maintain those minutes from your meetings to be able to prove that happened. If any resolutions or decisions were made, you need to maintain those as well. And then bank accounts are really an important part of maintaining that formality, where you want to make sure that you have that separate bank account between your individual finances and your business finances. That all goes into protecting your limited liability, which is a big part of an LLC or a corporation. So now that we understand why it's important and what are the main things we need to do to remain compliant, another important topic is what are other potential forms that you might need to file that aren't those required annual reports? So as I said with the annual reports, it's really important you have updated information with the state. And a lot of times people don't think about that. You make a change to your business and it's not top of mind that you contact the state to let them know. So there are two main routes that you might take. Amendments are used for bigger, kind of more material changes to your business. Things like your business name changed, your ownership or management structure has changed, or if you're a corporation, the authorized shares or outstanding share information has been updated. And that would all be done on an amendment form. The process is a little bit more formal for an amendment. It might require a meeting of your members or your shareholders and a resolution. And sometimes the filing fee for amendments are a little bit higher. But for other just minor updates, which would include things like your business address has changed, some states are capturing now more information beyond just your address. They're asking for email or phone number, and those things might need to be updated if it changes. And registered agent information. So if your name or your registered agent address changes, a lot of times the states have an easier form that you can do. Filing fee is a little bit cheaper and the process is easier. The name of that form is going to vary by state, but it's usually just like a business update form. And a lot of times that information can be just updated on your annual report. So if you have one due coming up, that's where you would make those changes. So a little vocab lesson here. The state where you have formed your business, you're considered a domestic business entity. So that's your home state, it's where you were formed. But as your business is growing and you want to expand and you want to do business in another state, you might want to consider a foreign qualification. With that, it increases those compliance requirements. So you're going to have more filing obligations, more ongoing requirements to maintain your business in those states. And with that comes additional risk because you're now having to comply with the laws in multiple states. And so we're going to talk about this foreign qualification process. And the first thing to note here is that when we say foreign in this context, we don't mean international. It's just any state other than the state where you were formed. So if I'm here in Ohio, if I'm a domestic entity in Ohio and I want to do business in Indiana or Pennsylvania, I would be considered a foreign entity in those states. So the process used, and again, the name of the form might vary, but the process is generally called a foreign qualification. This is required when you're transacting business in another state. Now, unfortunately, most of the state laws don't define what transacting business means. And so there is some ambiguity there. A lot of times you have to figure it out based on case law research, but generally the reasons or times that you might need to do a foreign qualification is when you start hiring multiple employees in another state, you're opening offices, you have warehouse, you are owning property under the business name in another state, or you start generating a significant portion of your revenue in another state. Those would be reasons that it's probably time to do a foreign qualification. And as I said, the risk goes up when you're transacting business in multiple states. And so it's important to consider these best practices and think about what you need to do to make sure that you're complying. So you'll want to know what are those state by state filing requirements. So the annual report requirement you have in your home state might be different in foreign states. You'll have to maintain a registered agent in each of those states. This is usually when someone thinks about hiring a professional service to be their registered agent if they haven't already done so in their home state, because you need to have someone who is there during regular business hours, Monday through Friday, to accept business mail on your behalf, the important legal mail. And so, you might not have someone working for your company who's available to do that in all states. And so professional registered agent services like LegalZoom and others are able to do that for you. And then thinking through, like, how are you going to maintain this information? What is your kind of source of truth for all of these requirements? It's not great to rely just on memory or one employee being responsible for all of this. So think about the ways that you're going to maintain all of those requirements in each state. And as you continue to expand and grow, something that you can add additional requirements to. I really think once you hit like three or more estates, that's when it gets to be pretty complex and hard to manage all of that, and likely a good time to think about working with a professional service who might be able to do some of that for you. As your business continues to grow and you're expanding, you might also want to consider changing the structure of your business. And so we're going to talk about kind of the main ways that you would do that. So mergers and conversions are powerful tools, but they do require careful planning. There is potential impact on your taxes, especially if you're making a change to your entity mid-year. You're going to have to figure out how to handle your taxes leading up to that date and then post change to your business. Think about the governance changes as well. So maybe if you're an LLC, you're used to not having a lot of formalities and you become a corporation, it's a lot of new requirements that you're going to have to follow. So this is oftentimes where people consider talking to an attorney or a tax professional about how to make these changes and the timing when to execute. So first, I wanted to explain what is a merger. This is when you have one or more entities that are combining into one existing entity. And there'll be one entity that survives that merger. So maybe you have 10 entities combining into one. Those other entities are going to be inactive moving forward. The reason that people do this, it's a good way to combine your operations, your resources, bringing in talent into your business, helping with market reach. It really can improve your efficiency. You can attract more customers this way. And so, maybe when you're thinking about a competitor, maybe the best approach is instead of competing with them, just bring them into your business. But there are a lot of reasons that people might consider a merger. Conversions, on the other hand, just involves one entity. And this is where you're changing the type of business it is. Most common conversions would be an LLC converting into a corporation or a corporation converting into an LLC. So the reason people might do this is to align with a new tax strategy. Maybe they have a new investor they're bringing on who would prefer a different type of entity type. That's often when someone is, requesting that they become a corporation. Investors may feel the same. Maybe you would like to do an organization kind of like management change, and that might be a reason to do a conversion. But again, similar issues to a merger where you would need to consider the tax implications and the governance changes that could be involved with both. So one of the topics that I've always enjoyed talking about, because this is something that we have really seen a big change in the last 5 to 10 years. Really 10 years ago, there was a lot of fraud that started because of online filing systems with the state that kind of opened up opportunities for people to submit fraudulent filings. But during COVID, we saw an even greater increase in business fraud. So it's, I think, an important thing to make people aware of because we just don't hear as much about this as you do personal identity theft. Businesses are at greater risk for this too if they're inactive, not compliant. Again, fraudsters are assuming that you're not paying attention to your business, and so they're ripe for this fraudulent work. And so what is business identity theft? Well, it's very similar to what you would think of as individual identity theft. They're going to use your business name, your EIN, your credit history, and other information for fraudulent purposes. It can occur with active and inactive, happens more though with inactive. And so individual ID theft is much more well known. There's also a lot more protections out there for individuals who have had ID theft. Business identity theft in most states isn't even recognized in their criminal statutes. So, there's still ways that it can be addressed. You can report it to law enforcement or your attorney general's office, and there are other things that they might be able to pull into it, but it is a lot harder to address. And because of that, it leads a lot to the individuals, the business owners, to try to resolve it themselves. Some examples of things to pay attention to and what might happen. Things that I have seen is where someone is going to connect themselves to your business entity, and that might be by filing a document on your record so that their name appears on the public record in some way connected to your business. And then they're using your entity maybe just for the credibility. If I attach my name to a business that was formed 30 years ago, and I can now use that to apply for loans, it looks like a much more credible report than someone who is just starting a business and then trying to get a loan. You can use your credit history for that. A big issue we saw here in Ohio about 5 years ago was someone who reinstated a bunch of inactive businesses and then applied for their unclaimed funds with the state. So the things that you want to look for, someone updating your officer information, your registered agent information without your consent. Um, they're also changing addresses, and this can either be done at the Secretary of State's filing forms to change your address of your business and also at the post office. And they're doing that to intercept mail, mail that would be a red flag to you. So if they are taking out credit or loan in your name, they don't want you to see that mail and that documentation. They're also changing addresses to intercept your mail and maybe taking checks and payment from your customers. So those are things to be mindful of and watch out for. The impact on your business, obviously financial losses are significant. Taking out loans in your name and then you're on the hook for them. It's really difficult to unwind that harm. There's damage to your reputation, your credit history, and then obviously that operational disruption. So the time and the money that you have spent on trying to unwind the damage of the fraudsters is time and energy and resources that should be spent on growing your business. So these are the things that we really want to avoid, and here are the ways that we can do that. The number one thing is to monitor your SOS record, monitor your Secretary of State filings. A lot of times now the Secretary of States have alert systems. So if your business was filed recently within the last couple of years, most states have technology where they're notifying you when something has changed, maybe an email that's being sent to you to let you know that something was filed on your record. But in states where they added that recently and maybe you filed before, a lot of times you're able to sign up for that service. So look into that, but still periodically check your record. Make sure everything's up to date and accurate and that you authorized all of the filings. The other thing is, just like you would check your individual credit report, you want to check your business credit report too. Make sure nothing's jumping out at you. That is something you did not approve. And then look for, any unsolicited mail, things that just don't look right to you. If you're getting all sorts of notices about a credit card that appears to be in your name, and you're like, well, we didn't open that. Don't ignore that. Pay attention and follow up and make sure that it wasn't you. So there's a lot of mail being sent to businesses that could be misleading, and there's a lot of things that could be clues for you in that mail. So question that mail if it doesn't look right to you. So we've covered a lot in this short period of time, and so I wanted to leave you with some tips and some takeaways. So these are some things where it can be overwhelming to think of all these filings that you have to do, especially if you're in multiple states, tax filings and periodic filings. And so creating a compliance calendar, and this could be a calendar, if you like an old school paper calendar or a digital tool, but making sure that you're tracking those deadlines so that you know that you're not going to miss a deadline and result in a late fee or penalty. Maintain accurate records. I know I've stressed this one a lot, but it's really important that the information is up to date with the state. So anytime that you have a move or a change in your registered agent, make sure you notify the state of that. Staying informed. And this one is a hard one. Most small businesses don't have their own legal counsel on staff or a legislative person to be tracking laws, but if you are a business, you're responsible for knowing what are the laws and the regulations, things like business license requirements and things that your business needs to be following. So stay up to date with those, track those, anything that might be impacting your business. There are professionals who can help, especially with that piece that many small businesses might not have the resources to address on their own. So consider working with a professional service like LegalZoom. We can help with forming the business, serving as your registered agent. We send compliance alerts so that you're not going to miss those deadlines. And then we can update you when regulations change that might be impacting your business entity. So these are, things that you can do on your own. Again, think about how you can store that information in a way that it doesn't rest just on one person in your business, but a single source of truth that everyone can access. So here is information. We would love to connect with you and help you in any way. So feel free to scan this QR code. You can use that link to schedule an assessment with us where we can look at your compliance record of your business. How does it appear currently with the state? Are there any updates or changes you need to make? Or maybe you are in bad standing and we can help you get back to good standing. There's also a phone number here if you would like to reach out to us. We're glad to discuss more of this in detail and how it relates to your individual business. We have a few minutes left, so at this point, I would like to open it up if there are any questions. I'd be glad to try to help today. Hearing any questions yet? It looks like, okay, we got them here. Will the slides be available? I'll leave that one to the team, but I'm fine certainly sharing my slides here. Yeah, looks like, okay, great. So the slides will be available. Well, if there are no other questions, it was great to connect with all of you today, and please feel free to reach out to us. We would love to help take your business kind of to that next level. I know it can be overwhelming, but we're here to assist. Thank you. I appreciate the
Oh, so
time.
there's one request to go back one slide.
Yeah. Great.
Somebody's having microphone issues.
Oh, I see that now. Okay. There we go. Okay. Yep. So these are our tips. Feel free to type in if you have any questions about this. All right.
Perfect. If there's no additional questions, we can get wrapped up. But thank you, Allison, for such a great presentation. As a reminder, today's webinar recording and presentation materials will be posted on our website, along with all of our other past webinars by the end of day. We wanted to thank you all again for joining us today. This does conclude our webinar, and we hope you'll join us for future NSVGCA webinars. Thank you, and I hope you have a great day.